Good Abend and good evening, everybody, to the first lecture on global culture of this season, of the autumn 2014. I'm Michael Schindhelm, the curator of this lecture series, and I'm very happy to welcome here Dominique Perrault, the architect and professor, among us to open our new season on global culture tonight. We are doing this together with the Museum for Gestaltung, the Design Museum of Zurich, which hosts currently a great exhibition on the underground, here not in the underground, but on the ground floor of this building. Who hasn't seen yet the exhibition should try to still catch up with it, because it's a great exhibition, I must say. I'm very impressed by it, and I know that in 10 days or so, it's going to be finished, so hurry up if you haven't seen the exhibition yet. Dominique Perrault is one of the great architects of our time, in particular in France. He has his practice in Paris, is known for some very important buildings, public and private, political and for sports purposes. Most known is maybe the French National Library in Paris. Among other projects he may also refer to in his speech later, include also buildings in Japan and Korea, but also the Olympic Velodrome and swim stadium in Berlin, some other venues of that kind in other European cities, etc. He is known also for having designed the largest tower, the tallest tower of Vienna in Austria, but he is also interested in the underground. And this is actually the reason why we have invited him for tonight, because there is an obvious connection to the exhibition downstairs. Mr. Perrault is also professor at the École Polytechnique in Lausanne, and his focus is indeed there, among other things, the underground. And to not spend too much time already in advance, I would like to give you the floor, Dominique Perrault, now to present to us your presentation, which has a slightly different title, as I'm not mistaken, than what is here on display. Thank you very much, and I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this this opportunity to present our work in research about the underground situation. First, I would like to say I am very impressed by the exhibition. I visited too quickly with Andres Janser. It's a fantastic work. Thank you. It's pity, obviously, no catalog, but we're proud about that. And it's a big theme, the question about underground, because we know now all qualities and all components about the surface of the planet. And we have two ways. We go in the air, but we are working about that, and we test, but it's not very successful at this moment. It's very far. But also, we have another way. We could go underground. And this world is not a dark world, not a humid world. It's something, maybe a new territory for the humanity. And we try to introduce this research with this title. Is a English title, but this name and this word doesn't exist. We combine, like a landscape, we introduce the groundscape. And with different approaches, The first one is about the landscape. And well, I'm interested by this special, I don't know, deepness about the soil, and also we introduce some reference. You know this kind of reference, and this one is very famous and very important from Isola and Gabetti. This relationship between the landscape and the building itself, and we not compare exactly, but we are going in parallel way with some project, and this one is in Salerno in Italy, and it's a existing situation about a career, and we develop with the same staircase section. We develop a project is about the theme of octopus. It's a building for events, music, and with a fantastic view on the sea, and along the highway between Roma and the city of Catania on the south of Italy. And this building is more or less like a part of the mountain. Another approach about the topography, or we rebuild when we change the topography, is in Korea. We introduce different projects about the underground strategy in Korea, and this one is in a very nice landscape, and it's a campus for Anghwa company. Is a huge company, Korean company, and the idea to introduce like some this kind of circle, like a bracelet, and working like terraces, and the idea is to be very smooth and to creating a new topography, including in the landscape. Obviously, the ground is a material, and for example, is a very nice and special situation in in Carrara, and also Michael Eisner, the American artist, very well known, and working about the landscape. And it's like for us is like more or less like a joke to compare the valley in Iowa University with this kind of work of the artist in the landscape. And you could see in the Google image the valley in the campus valley in the center of the campus of Iowa University. Iowa University is a huge territory like that, more or less. And the idea is to rebuild the original topography in this part of Seoul with the relief, with some hills, and to expand and increase this street between the metro station and the campus. And we would like to merge two approaches. One of them is to build a landscape, and another one is to creating a public space. It is the existing condition with this car park and this training sport stadium. And it is a project with the new surface and the valley inside. It is also the intensity about the urban life in this district, and in this campus you have 25,000 students, and with the valley we are creating a new identity, and especially we are building a landscape. That is the leitmotif and the statement about this project, to build a landscape. We don't want to build a building, and especially we don't want to build another pavilion in the campus of this university. And in fact, we could develop also from this, this place a network between the building, the new building, and the existing building. And we could connect this building underground, on this building on the left there, and we could connect this building, this one and this one, with this central building, the central part of the campus along the valley. Also, another idea is very important and and very often about the underground strategy. We promote and we protect also, but we promote some space, and especially public space. And in this valley is not only like a street, like a piazza, but it's also a place for event and for some festival, movie festival, music festival in the university. Another aspect is about the sustainability, about the water control, and also about this kind of heating system with a very passive system, because we are at maybe 20 meters underneath of the ground floor, and we could get some interesting situation for the fresh air, and go down, and after we push into the building this air going down along the rocks. And for that, we should dig some big holes. And that is maybe the most important question, especially about architecture, because this kind of work is very, not exactly very, but is standard about the infrastructure for underground, subway, for example, and some other underground mobilities. But for building, is about this kind of scale, is a special strategy and special kind of construction work on the site. And about the protection, this project is also in Korea, in the south of the Korea, and this city is a city of Galtex. Galtex is an oil company, Korean oil company, and you have a lot of factory and all people working in this kind of factory, connecting with oil transformation. And Caltex would like to protect some part of the landscape, this highland, and also this hill with a small temple on the top. And we imagine a promenade along this small territory. And also Galtex would like to develop some cultural foundation, and the idea is to build a line, and under this line we introduce some facilities like a concert hall, like galleries, and so. But the one aspect is very interesting, is this one, because we are in between the ground floor and the space underground. We are going down by the staircase, the monumental staircase, like a gallery outdoor, for the sculpture, especially, you will see some image. But in between these two layers, you have some special spaces working. They are very, very comfortable because they are in between, in and out. It is a different function. It's a very important project, and this project disappears totally underneath the skin of the landscape. It is the staircase with the pergola to protecting against the wind and the rain. Another one is also about the project in Berlin. It's also underground project with two big halls, a velodrome and a swimming pool. And the idea is about the disappearance of the architecture. It's a political approach also. It's not only an aesthetical approach, it's also a political approach, because this project, I won this project in a competition for because Berlin would like to be involved in the Olympic Games for the millennium. And in this candidature of Berlin, we design this project. And this project is exactly the opposite project if you compare with the main stadium in Berlin used and worked during the Olympic Games in the 36 during the Nazi power. And with this architecture, we disappear completely into an orchard, apple trees. We plant 400 apple trees around these two shapes, roof in a metal fabric, in a mesh, covered by some carpet in a metal fabric, and seems to be like a water plant. And also, in the underground situation, you have some sacred spaces. And I would like to show you a project for a sanctuary of Notre-Dame-du-Los in the south of France. And this idea is to introduce a new place in reference, for less, like the Ethiopian church. And we would like to introduce a new church outdoor, open on the sky here, because you have at this place the house of Benoît de Rancurel. Is a very saint person, and this church with the tomb of Benoît of Rancurel. And in between, we don't want to change the quality of the environment, but we would like to introduce a way and a promenade between this sacred house and the church. And the idea is to introduce under the skin of the landscape these different spaces, like this one just underneath of the church, and connecting with this kind of staircase. And we mixed some infrastructure in concrete about the design and the calculation, and some infrastructure directly dig in the rock. And another question is the light. The light is different. and the light also could be introduced in the underground space with some optical instrument. For example, in this project of the city, for the City of Culture in Santiago de Compostela in Spain, we introduce a big prism in glass with some mirrors inside and screens, and the mirror conduct the light into in the center, more or less, of this hill. And nobody walk in this volume, in the glass volume, is only technical volume to manage and control the natural light, and also during the night. In the other way, the light sprout out from the interior of the hill, and we could install around this this instrument is huge, because it's a 100 meter and the high, and we could design some spaces with some natural light for concert hall, library, galleries, and so, and everybody walk around this this volume, and this volume merge also some natural light, some natural image from the sky with cloud and so, and also on screen we could merge some artificial and other kind of image with the natural image on the mirror. And sorry. Mm-hmm. I have a problem. Excuse me. Thank you. And about this kind of instrument, we develop at this moment this one. This one is absolutely small. Is a smaller, if you compare with the former instrument, is also a prism in Versailles. And with this this volume in glass with some thin structure in metal, we would like to introduce the light in a new underground basement of one wing of the Château de Versailles. And this part is very important because it's the new entrance and the new exit for the public. And the public is 7 million visitors by here, and the people are coming by this new gallery between Cour Royale and Cour des Princes, and they start the visit, and they finish the visit by the basement of the chateau. And the volume in glass is there, and we are creating a new staircase along this wing of the 17th century, and we are creating this staircase and these different rooms, and we introduce this volume in between to conduct the natural light in the basement of the chateau. And some reference with Gordon Matta Clark, for example. It is the wing in the Château de Versailles. And also we build a small conference center in the west of Paris. And it's a manor, and this manor is not absolutely beautiful, but is existing, is an existing condition in the middle of a park, and we develop the expansion of this building underground, and we put this manor on the disc, on the glass. It's a glass roof, and it seems to be like a water pool, and underground we got some function for auditorium and a cafe, and this new staircase connect the rooms into the building itself, and the base with the conference center. And this project is also a project to protect existing condition, and especially existing architecture. It's in Brussels, along the Parc Royal, and you have these two blocks is there, two cubes, built during the 70s. And we would like to keep this building, interesting building, and it is a bank. And for this bank, we are creating another volume underground around this kind of courtyard. And it's like that, for example, in India. And it is a building in Brussels for the headquarters, and we compare also the quality of the life and the working spaces in this building if we compare with some atrium or other interior space in the building of the bank in this district. And here we introduce also the light with this kind of big curtain wall, and also we covered the foundation, the structure of the foundation, with some small panel in a stainless steel mirror, like that, and some view on the landscape. And this story starts more or less with the National Library in Paris, because the main idea about this building is to build a huge and new public space in the center of a new district. This strategy about the urban design is to create a void, and to create a void it was necessary to push down the volume of the library. And we build in the center of this of the library, we are building an important garden, a small forest, and through the trees of the forest, like in this more or less paradise garden, the light is filtered. And around, you have most part of the facilities of the National Library, but especially reading rooms underneath the canopy of trees. And this space is very comfortable, and especially about the acoustic condition, because we are, and we feel this space like a very quiet space, very far from the urban noise of the city around. About the urban scale appear the question, the relationship between this kind of space underground with a big depth, more or less. But if we compare this kind of situation between the garden of the library in Paris and on the right, the gallery of a metro station in Naples. And the question is, we go down and how we could creating a scenography and a quality about the physically and the perception and the view and the different feeling when you are going down. It is the piazza of Garibaldi in Naples, and the station of the metro is at minus 50 meter underground. It is, and we are creating this galleria outside, and the people go down, and with this different material, we organize the presence of the light at the bottom of this station. And the people go down. It is a station. It is a section, and you could see how we reduce the depth of the station with this gallery, and also after we are working with this kind of different materials to conduct the light at the bottom of the station. Another one, it's a project about Grand Paris, an important station close to a hospital in Villejuif. And this station also is at 50 meter underground. And the idea, and also we have a special situation because you have a line of metro there. Another one is a cross, is a crossway of two lines of metro. And in this case, we try to organize a special urban life on and about the three levels just underneath the public space, and after you go down directly to the bottom of the station. And different project, it's on the left is a project of Anschluss line, and in Salzburg, and on the right is a fiction about this kind of depth skyscraper. And this one is not underground, but it's exactly the same morphology with a light on the top. Some very well-known photo of Andras Gursky or another one. And it is the idea to create some inverse building, and this kind of situation and commission about this new system of public transportation, of the new metro in Paris, is a really opportunity to creating some new urban situation, organize some underground system and network of the metro, but connecting and visually and about some feelings with fresh air, with the light, and so with the district above. And it is a view when you go out of the metro, and you could see some different ramps and platform above. And this system and working with some utopic or fiction about the urban network. And it's this urban network is a real solution about the development of the metropole. And the city change, and the city is, a lot of cities are in mutation between the historical situation to the metropolitan organization. And the urban network quickly, you know, this kind of fantastic vision in 31, and also the introduction of this kind of mechanical vision of about underground, some utopia, and also this one in Paris under the Seine River in the 70s, and this kind of architect imagine a project of Les Halles in the center of the city in the 60s, and also some existing network very impressive and working in Montreal, and this one in Toronto, and just also to see the connection between the building of Miss Van der Rohe in Toronto and the basement of this building. The same thing about our tower. We built this tower in Osaka with a special space in the relationship between the passage network underground and the basement of the building. About this iceberg situation, it is the building above, Fukuoka Tower, and some atrium with different crossing connection between different passages, and this is a view, and also this kind of links, and it is a model, a conceptual model about the network, underground network between the valley of Iwa and different vertical circulation, the basement and the footprint of the building around, and some different links between the existing building and the new one. And I would like to finish this presentation by this fiction is Avenue Foch in Paris, and you could see the Arc de Triomphe at the end of the perspective, and at this moment Avenue Foch is an empty space without qualities. The building around have very important qualities, and they are very expensive, but this void is nothing. And the idea is to introduce this kind of new topography to change the quality of this space, but also to switch with some other building, like, for example, university, movies, some car park, some other facilities, some database, some different system could be and working very well underground, like the basement of the intense basement of the metropole, and with this new, more or less, land, we could build some housing, and we could switch between the underground facilities and this territory now free, and we could build some like exchange between underground and housing project, and that is more or less idea to contain and to maintain the density of the city, and without a new territory about the expansion of the metropole. That's it. Thank you. Voilà. Merci. Il y a quelques images complémentaires, mais qui sont connues. Voilà.
Thank you so much for this very interesting and comprehensive introduction to your work and to your ideas and reflections on this extremely complex, as we can see, subject of the underground, or as you have created the ground space. Andres Janser is among us. He is the curator of the exhibition here at the museum, at the Design Museum. He is anyway curator here at the museum and at the same time teacher at the Zurich University of the Arts. His subjects in the past were mainly architecture, interior design, and its relations to other cultural fields like film, narration in general. As I said already, I was very intrigued by this exhibition downstairs. As we can see, it's a vast, if not infinite, territory of a subject as a subject of research and exploration, the underground. So you have to make decisions on how to find your way through this enormous territory. I would say in your presentation, you created a very interesting magistral narrative about your work and its extensions to the subject of what you call the ground space. Anders, you had to find your own concept on how to sort of find a focus and to point out to a few things. What I noticed is that you sort of neglected the historical part of the underground and focused on the contemporary condition of it. So could you give us a kind of summary of what was your major finding and what is the driving force for the new interest in the underground?
We have to, no, it works. Huh? I think that there's a basic connection a bit between our, let's say, two different, but still in a sense, say identical interest in the field. I'm also convinced that it's an absolute contemporary topic. Of course, it has its history, and you made some references, some important ones, to the history of spaces underground. but it's an absolutely contemporary topic, and I also think it's very a relevant topic. So I think we really should deal with it. You, of course, do it as an architect, as an urban planner, but also as a teacher. We, as a museum, maybe have a slightly different approach, also in the end a different interest. But still, we were surprised during the preparation phase of the exhibition to learn that it hadn't really been shown before. In a sense, show the underground in a certain variety, maybe not in its complete, in all its topics, but in a certain variety of different and important subjects within the underground. So it hasn't really been tried, and we tried it, and I appreciate that you like it. The idea was also of course, to make it into some kind of an architectural exhibition, so it deals with design, with space, with light, and these, let's say, more architectural topics, but also as a cultural phenomenon, like people living underground when they find no alternative, like the underground culture in a cultural sense, which in parts, but only in parts, takes place or happens underground spatially, but not only there. So we included other interests that people may have in the underground. But something maybe I can connect to what you just said, or it's rather a question, you know. In one of this thematic space of the exhibition, it's, as I said, about space and light and color and dimension and so on underground. You made a strong point in favor of daylight, of bringing daylight into these underground spaces to make them, I would say, maybe even more pleasant, but certainly to avoid that people would not like to go there. So it seems to me that daylight is for you an important, maybe a crucial factor. Or to put it the question the other way around, could you imagine maybe a strong, or for you a valid or relevant architectural concept which kind of excludes daylight underground, which kind of is based on artificial light, saying well, we are underground, so having no daylight is just, well, an option. Could there be something valid for you, or a path to follow, or is it always so that you are trying to bring as much daylight as possible into these underground spaces when you are able to design them and to create them?
No, in fact, the main idea and the statement about this different project is to create some special condition to increase the density about a place, about a building, and so. And the daylight, the natural light, is very important. The daylight is very important. About the first belt, if you want, because I think if we around this part of the project, we could have some other belt with some other kind of light. And I think it's very coherent about the horizontal strategy. Because, for example, in Iwa, we have the first layers are directly connecting with the daylight. But behind, you have some light, different, more, no dark, but in between. And after, we have some dark rooms with some special function. And my idea is about the city, for example, in Paris, is to identify some point with this kind of idea or project, not whole part, but sometime, somewhere. And from these points, we could develop a network around this point. And this network could organize the sharing spaces about the underground network existing. Because about the economical field, we spend a lot of money. It's very expensive to build underground. If you compare the cost of the city above the ground floor and underneath of the ground floor, underground, is above the floor is nothing about the cost. The cost is underground. The cost of the city is underground. It's not above. The cost of the facade is something, but it's not very expensive if you compare with the cost of the tunnel. It's very different. And also about water, gas, and so a lot of this, and car park, and so. And I think it could be very interesting to develop a sharing situation between these different investment. And I think it's a more or less, at this moment, it's just an idea. But I think this kind of idea could work very well, because if we reduce the presence about different facility above the ground floor of the city, we could grasp some new part of the land and we could build some housing. Because the problem about the metropole is housing. We have need a lot of housing in all cities, especially in Europe, but around the world. And the question, for me, about the research is, okay, we could develop a special layers, a little bit deep, a thick layer, une épaisseur, okay? Above the ground floor and also underneath. And this layer, you could plant, you could plug some buildings above. It is a street, it's along the street, it's not a tower, it's the city. And I think it's another vision about the underground relationship. It's not only very deep, it's not, no, it's in between. It's like epiderm, you know? It's an epiderm of the city. That is the idea.
I liked your reference to the topography in the end, where you're saying it's actually the topography is not necessarily underground. It's not necessarily above the ground. Topography is a three-dimensional. Right. You call it now epidermis. However, I would like to come back to the issue, which is, among other things, the financial aspect, that it's so much more expensive to go underneath. So, in the beginning of your speech, you made a kind of hint when you were saying that we are building higher and higher and higher, and this is, of course, a competition we are used to, right? I lived for a few years in Dubai while Burj Khalifa was under construction, and those buildings are usually not only, let's say, buildings as such, but at the same time, they talk to us. They have a kind of communication function. So skyscrapers in particular, the history of skyscrapers is also the history of the communication about the city, about power. And you made also references here how much buildings, in particular, of course, special buildings, have a certain reference to culture, to religion, to sports, to politics, etc. So my question here is, if it's so much more expensive, why we should actually not put our efforts more in building even higher, in order to creating also density, but actually why we still should go underground? What is your rationale for doing it anyway?
And in fact, for example, about the new network for the new metro in the Grand Paris. We are spending a lot of billions euros about a tunnel. We build a tunnel, one tunnel, only one. It's crazy. Why not two? Or maybe a bigger tunnel, because in this tube, this pipe, it's possible to introduce some other facilities. For example, for the delivery, the e-commerce is very efficient. At this moment, we built some huge warehouse 40 kilometers from the city, and with some trucks. We spend a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of pollution to deliver the package from the e-commerce. Underground system is possible, but we should think. Okay, it's expensive, yes and no. It's expensive because this kind of infrastructure are expensive. About the water system, about different, and also now we could have some interesting function to be underground about a database, for example. And database. It's very interesting to get the database rooms very close to some offices and so, and companies. And it could be a good base for a building, you know, and I think this, if you add, to make a addition about different components, different programs, we are creating a living network, not only a network for the metro, a network for the water, a network for that. We could combine. And finally, I think this the idea about to develop some roots from the building, that is the idea. A building with roots. The question is not to say, I am agree about skyscraper or not. It's not a question. All is possible. The best is all, but some roots.
You often speak about landscape. I think for you, dealing with ground space, as you say, dealing with the underground is always to sort of challenging in a specific way nature, in a different way than architecture usually does, because there's everything about statics necessary when you build up, and maybe it's a different task if you actually dig into the ground. I would like to know your exhibition focuses quite a bit on Switzerland as a country with a lot of experience in digging deeper into the ground. Is actually the natural condition a reason why certain countries have started earlier and developed more underground spaces than others? And I think this is the case, that you find in some areas of the world a more advanced development of underground than in others. Is the nature, among others, maybe the verticality of the nature, a reason why this is happening?
Well, in Switzerland it certainly is and has been so for a long time. But it's on one hand it's kind of topography, or let's call it the Alps in the Swiss context. But it only is important in connection to a development which leads to density, you know. And density has something to do with social development, with economics. So there are countries obviously with high mountains and not so much underground buildings or constructions. It's probably the better word. But in Switzerland, yes, of course, that combination of topography on one hand and density on the other hand is crucial. For those who have been downstairs, there's one of kind of graphic infographic, so to say, about the city of Zurich, about infrastructure, about tunnels, and so on. And in that case, it's obvious that if you make the same plan for a more rather, let's say, rather flat city like Basel, the image would be a different one in terms of infographics. So yes, Basel and Zurich have more or less the same density, but Zurich has more hills in simple terms. Yes, there is of course a combination. And I think there's also a strong idea, maybe in the heads of many people, that it's, let's say, maybe not always a good thing, but it's rather positively seen to do something on the ground. You know, you can protect yourself. It can be safer down there, but you also can, and there I would obviously agree with you. You can put things on the ground in order to save the space overground for other things. And in that line, Switzerland obviously has a long and strong tradition.
I see another point here. If you talk about the natural condition in our urban landscape, urbanscape today, this is the climate. We are building very often today huge cities in areas where cities were normally not built. I'm not only talking now about Dubai as a specific case, but let's say Singapore, or Hong Kong, many of these cities have been developed in areas with a very, let's say, particular climate condition, which forces people actually to rather protect themselves from daylight, protect themselves from being outdoor. Is this actually a potential other argument? If, for example, if you go to, that's why I'm mentioning these two cities, Hong Kong or Singapore, you're actually traveling already most of the time underground instead of being actually above the ground, because the infrastructure has been laid down underneath already in many of these cities due to the climate condition. Do you actually think that this is a trend which will last for longer and will be maybe even a template also for redevelopments in other parts, in our countries, for example?
Yes, I will go next week in Hong Kong and to about this this question: how is possible to connect the underground system and the urban system, because it's a, in fact, in Singapore is also the same thing. It's very strange because we build some cities above the ground floor, and we build some other cities underground, but without physical connection. We have some functional connection. We have some elevator, lift, we have some staircase, you have some, okay, but physically, nothing. And for me, my analysis is we change about the relationship between the natural and the artificial situation. During the before, we consider the natural situation and condition of the city is above. Underground is artificial. But now, the relationship, the contemporary relationship about the artificial situation is totally different. Because for me, the world is artificial. Because the human being touch hole on the world. And if the human being touched something is not natural, is finished, is artificial. And this new relationship between the pure nature and the artificial, yes, is for me is a real challenge to develop another kind of density for the urban life, and I think it's a treasure, in fact, but we at this moment is totally disconnected, you know.
In your exhibition, I can see that you're dealing also with the question of how this space is going to be used. What kind of function you would allocate to underground spaces. As you said, it's very expensive, and maybe it's not a surprise that, for example, in cities like Hong Kong and Singapore, which are particularly expensive too, most of these underground spaces are actually not used for residential purposes, but for shopping. They're actually endless shopping malls. What is your impression or the result of your research? How the space in our countries is being used mostly today? Turned into something commercial, or is there also a kind of driving force to using it for public purposes, make it accessible?
I don't know if I have a really good answer to that question, but yes, of course, there are several, let's say, public functions, and as we are now in a museum, obviously museums are more and more built underground in terms of, let's say, storage spaces for collections, but also for exhibition spaces where daylight is really not wanted. So and then in combination with a certain respect of an urban or even landscape context, in a Zurich context, for instance, like Museum Riedberg, or there's this Tadawando museum in Japan in the exhibition. So museums are obviously one of the main functions which in the past, let's say 20, 30, 40 years have a certain tendency to be built, if they're newly built, underground. Obviously storage spaces, traffic spaces, but I would like to make maybe yet another point. You mentioned a little bit earlier that, of course, the important case of Burj Khalifa, the still highest building in the world in Dubai, which in economical terms just doesn't make sense. Yeah? It has been hugely expensive to build this one, so and I wouldn't agree on the idea that it's basically cheap to build overground. It has a certain limit. Above, let's say, 5, 6, or 7 floors above ground, it starts to become quite expensive, and really high-rise buildings are very expensive. So I think it depends on let's say, on the distance how high you are up above ground. So I like very much this idea of epidermis, which has a certain part above ground and a certain part below ground, you know. And in both directions, it gets really expensive if you exceed it, going down, but also going up.
Did you come across, this is a question to both of you, sort of business models for what you're describing, also a kind of ratio for what would be kind of the optimum between being above and being underground? That could be actually a very interesting kind of business plan to develop a city this way.
Well, an indirect answer, I asked the city architect of Zurich, Director des Amtes für Städtebau, if he had any information about the percentage of the architectural buildings being below ground and above ground, or also how many, let's say, cubic meters have been built in the city of Zurich in terms of architecture. And he basically said, well, good question, no idea at all. So whereas urban planners, architects have a quite detailed knowledge about what has been built above ground, you know, be it living, housing, or office buildings, but there's just no data available about what has been built below ground. With the tunnels, it's different. Engineer works, there we know it quite precisely in the Swiss context, but in terms of architecture and urbanism, to my knowledge, there's no information available. I don't know if it's different in Paris, where you are more familiar with, if the urban planners, architects know something about how much has been built underground and how much has been built above ground. Would you know anything about that?
And about the rules, and in Paris at this moment we are working with the city to change the rule, because the rule is very clear: no underground system, no underground courtyard, nothing, and it's a very caricatural approach. It's on the urban roles side, okay, but about this strategy underground, I like this strategy because it's absolutely contextual. It's impossible to think a global approach about underground solution. It's impossible because you have, for example, a building there, and you should dig something. You have a quality of the soil. You have a relationship between infrastructure underground and your project. You have a lot of information. You should manage and find a good synthesis between these different information. And it's absolutely contextual. It's impossible to be generic. It's impossible. Because if you build a building, it could be generic. Because without roots, it's generic. But about the underground building, it's totally local. Absolutely local. The same building, you could switch between, for example, the north of Zurich and the south of Zurich with the same concept. It's not the same building because the situation is different, you know. And I like it. For the architecture, I think it's a very strong position, and it's not autonomous approach. You should think a conceptual vision, and you should introduce this conceptual vision in a very contextual situation, globally conceptual.
You have introduced in the end of your talk the term of the network, which makes a lot of sense when talking about the underground, because the network is not two-dimensional. It has actually certainly also a verticality, which may also go underneath the ground. I think that architects generally have a very strong responsibility for social changes in our society today. By designing buildings, by designing and planning cities, we sort of design behavior, design social relationships, design a society too, to some extent. So the society we live in today is mostly, let's say, influenced on the one hand on the concept of the Western city, most likely, and maybe even more the American cities since the second half of the 20th century. So now, taking this into consideration, what you're presenting here, do you actually imagine that there's a possibility to introducing a networked society, which is in many ways probably our natural understanding of the 21st century society, a networked society which is interconnected regardless of where people live, underground or in a skyscraper in this country or in that country, is taking into consideration what you were presenting here as the notion of the underground. Do you imagine that this could also influence our social condition, that could change our society, putting an emphasis on the underground as such?
Yes, I think about the sharing space. Because it's this kind of situation, and you in your exhibition about the underground story and period underground, and we could have some vacant space, and this kind of space are very interesting about the sharing approach, about the co-working, and for example, and I think it's about the social, as you say, about the social situation, and it's new because it's a new opportunity, and and I think this kind of quality of the substance, urban substance, at the bottom of the building, it's for the people living and working, it's a new space for the intensity and for the space to the urban space.
We are talking here now already in the meantime for more than 20 minutes. Maybe there are also questions from your end, and we have microphones here. So if you want to ask a question to one of our speakers, you're happily invited.
Okay. Thanks first, all three of you, for the talk and the presentation beforehand. My question actually goes to both of you. I think it's not an accident that suburb is kind of like underneath and ground. So do you also have some kind of maybe stomach ache when you think of, for example, Grand Paris as something that is maybe underground, as maybe ideologically or morally thinking, also in terms of hierarchy, that's something that it is hidden and not shown?
About the project in Berlin, and this project is also urban strategy, because you have different districts, and this district was totally disconnecting by the metro, by the infrastructure of the metro, and by different situation. And during the east part of Berlin, and the idea is to build a void, and also to build some building without fence, no grid around, no fence, no boundaries, and for me also it's a citizen position, because this kind of building is our public building, and the people pay with tax to build this kind of building for the National Library also, and my idea is, okay, it's a public building, okay, but where is the space? Where is the public space? And usually, if you build a stadium, you build the stadium, and around you build a grid. And the relationship between the stadium and the district around is totally different. In this case, it's very cool. You have an empty space, and the people working, and you have some huge volume underground. And about the quality of the development of the district is very, very important, because you protect the future. And after you have some other consideration about the sustainability, but it's another thing. But I would like to say, in this case, we are creating we don't block, if you want, and we don't close the future about the development of the district, because you could go through this program, and everybody could get the benefit about the public space. And also, it's a add value of the building itself. It's not, for me, it's not enough to build a public building. You should build a public building, but also you should give, in the same movement, also a public space, working with a public building. If you are not underground, you are a fence around.
No, I guess my answer goes into a different direction, and I think it's a double-faced answer. on one hand, there's no contradiction between the idea of representation of something like importance or even power and building on the ground. You can also do that on the ground. There are examples in the exhibition like let's say the heart of FIFA, which has been built in Zurich, and on the ground that's a convention space for the representatives of the different countries and in the world coming together and negotiating issues of global football in that case. A really well-designed, architecturally well-designed space on the ground with really a great wish and a desire to do something representative, which also then looks good on the representative images. And also the Parti Communiste Français, the building by Oscar Niemeyer. So there is no contradiction between going on the ground and representation of power. That would be my one answer. And the other thing which I find interesting is that as buildings and spaces on the ground have a long duration, they are very firmly built, so they last a long time. So it happens very often that at a certain moment they are empty because they're not needed, not used anymore, and so other people can develop their own ideas of how to use them. And on that level, that what we call underground culture could develop in part actually spatially underground, in other parts maybe not, but having these spaces which are, let's say, protected, more discreet, in cases maybe even nobody would know about them, so that they give you a certain freedom to do something because it is not that visible compared to if you do it above ground. So I would agree on what Dominique earlier said, that you have to look on different specific cases, you know, spatially, but also in terms of what's the idea, what are you looking for by using or by building and using a space on the ground.
Another question? No, microphone is coming. I think we have not really understood what you were asking. Can you please repeat it? So the question, if I understand correctly, your question is how easy or difficult it is to redevelop something you have built underground in comparison to a normal building. Is this what you're asking?
It's good. Okay. It's different. It's different because, for example, about the sustainability, if you build underground, immediately you have a passive situation, immediately. And you invest maybe more money about walls, because walls should be maintain the soil around, but after, about the heating system, nothing. For example, in the university, they imagine, the staff of the university imagine to spend $2.5 million to pay by here the energy. But finally, they spend 800 million. No, 800 000. 800,000 dollars. It's totally different, you know. And I think it's interesting. You could compare the underground project and the project not underground. If you make a global approach. And also not about 1 year, but about maybe 10 years and 20 years. And at the end, and very quickly, finally, the balance, it's okay, it's working. Je sais pas si c'est compréhensible, mais voilà.
Thank you. I have to admit that most likely, due to your own schedule, we have to come to an end soon because your time at least is up. A last question from your end. There is somebody. Okay, you have the last call, so to say.
Do you see private housing on the ground in the future? Yes, why and not why not?
Private house? Yes, I built a private housing for me, for my vacation in Brittany, in France. It's very comfortable. It's very comfortable. And no wind in Brittany. You have in Brittany, in France, en Bretagne. And it's not windy, it's very relaxed. It's very nice. It's a facade, very long facade in glass on the south. Is finished. And you sleep, the north behind you, in front of you, the facade with the sun, and around you, you are underground. It's very, very comfortable.
Do you see that happening in cities, big private housing on the ground?
I don't know, I will see.
Are you asking for private housing or for residential housing in general? Because there's a difference. I think the right.
Speak about residential. Yes, residential. But for me, to live underground is not good. The question about underground is it's not for living. It's a underground is the root of the living building. Is not the living place. In the city.
But this is where we come from. Maybe to just conclude here, the caveman is probably all of our ancestor in one or the other way. And there are, of course, concepts also, as you know, some of your colleagues work also on this idea of re-enabling or rediscovering the quality of the cave as a residential space. That would be one of these many other possibilities to continue probably endlessly the subject, which is so resourceful. However, we have to probably conclude for now and here. Thank you very much, Dominique Perrault, for coming for a short but very intense visit today to Zurich. We appreciate it. I think I can talk not only about myself here, very much your talk. Andres Janser, once again, thank you very much also for your contribution and in general for this exhibition. The Spectacular of the Invisible is the undertitle, the subtitle to your exhibition. You made it sort of visible, or at least you opened the curtain a tiny bit. There's much more probably to see otherwise, but I hope that you, if you haven't seen it yet, will still get the chance. Thank you very much for you tonight, and good luck for all your work in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much.